Hello and welcome back to Cheating Tales Lab. We're grateful for each view and comment. Tell us, from which country or city are you watching today? We enjoy connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Man Behind the Mask. Vincent Harlow adjusted his Italian silk tie in the mirror, studying the weathered lines of his face. At 52, he still maintained the physique of a man who refused to surrender to time. His salt and pepper hair was meticulously styled, his posture perfect, every detail controlled, just like everything else in his life. Today was his daughter Melissa's wedding day. The event would cost him nearly $500,000, but Vincent didn't care about money. What he cared about was respect, loyalty, family, three things he valued above all else. You almost ready, Vince? His wife Diane's voice filtered through the bedroom door. The cars will be here in 20 minutes. Almost, he replied, his voice carrying the smooth confidence that had become his trademark. Vincent hadn't always been Vincent Harlow, respected businessman and pillar of the community. 30 years ago, he'd been Vinnie Harkins, the youngest enforcer for the Calabrese family in South Boston. A man who could solve problems with quiet efficiency, leaving no witnesses and fewer questions. He'd been good at what he did, too good, and when he wanted out, Salvatore Calabrese had made him an unusual offer. Take the money from their latest job, change his identity, and disappear forever. Salvatore's one condition: if I ever need you, you answer my call. Vincent had taken the deal, relocated to Arizona, built a successful security consulting firm from nothing, and met Diane Lowell, a stunning redhead with ambition that matched his own. They'd married quickly, had 2 children, Melissa and Timothy, and for 28 years, Vincent had lived his carefully constructed life without a single call from Boston. As he slipped his platinum cufflinks into place, Vincent recalled the photographs he'd received 6 months ago. Anonymous, delivered in a plain manila envelope to his private office. Pictures of Diane and Larry Donovan, his supposed friend and business partner, in compromising positions. Dates stamped in the corners going back 5 years. Most men would have confronted their wives immediately. Vincent wasn't most men. He'd spent 2 decades teaching corporations how to identify vulnerabilities, monitor threats, and neutralize problems before they became crises. Now he applied those same skills to his personal life. He hired discreet investigators, set up surveillance, and gathered information with cold precision. What he discovered was worse than a simple affair. Diane and Larry had been systematically manipulating Vincent's investments, isolating him from certain social circles, and preparing to destroy him. They'd involved his son Timothy, who resented his father's strict discipline, and had been working on turning Melissa against him as well. Their plan, as Vincent pieced it together, was sickeningly elegant. A public accusation at Melissa's wedding, revelations about Vinnie Harkins and his past, financial ruin, and social destruction. But they had underestimated who they were dealing with. For 6 months, Vincent had implemented his counter-strategy with surgical precision. He'd moved assets, collected evidence, secured allies, and set a complex web of contingencies in place, all while pretending he suspected nothing. He checked his watch. Today was the day they planned to destroy him. But Vincent had always preferred offense to defense. As he slipped the small remote control into his jacket pocket, he allowed himself a rare smile. Let the games begin, he whispered to his reflection. Chapter 2. The Family Web. Melissa Harlow stood in the bridal suite of the Grand Sonoran Resort, surrounded by bridesmaids fussing over her ivory dress. At 26, she was the perfect image of her mother, same auburn hair, same delicate features, but with her father's penetrating gray eyes. She caught sight of her reflection and fought back tears. Not tears of joy, but of apprehension about what would unfold in the hours ahead. 3 months ago, her mother had shown her evidence of her father's true nature. Newspaper clippings about Vinnie Harkins, violent enforcer. Bank records showing mysterious offshore accounts. And most disturbing, photos of her father meeting with known criminal figures just last year. He's not who you think he is, Melissa, Diane had said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. He's been living a lie, and he's putting all of us in danger. Melissa had been devastated. The father she adored, the man who had taught her to ride a bike, checked her closet for monsters, and intimidated her high school boyfriends, was apparently a fraud. A criminal living under a false identity. What her mother didn't know was that Melissa had gone to her father's office the next day, placed the file of evidence on his desk, and asked one simple question. Is this true? Vincent had looked at the material, then at his daughter, his expression unreadable. Some of it, he admitted, but not in the way they're trying to make you believe. For the next 2 hours, he told her the truth. About his past, yes, but also about her mother's betrayal. About Larry Donovan's manipulation. About the plot they had been orchestrating for years. Why are you telling me this? She had asked. Because you came to me first, he answered simply. You gave me the chance to explain. That means something to me, Melissa. He hadn't asked for her help, hadn't tried to turn her against her mother. He'd simply laid out the facts and told her to make her own decision. When he revealed his counterplan, the intricate trap he had set, Melissa was both terrified and awed by his methodical thinking. They'll never forgive you for this, she had warned. I'm not looking for forgiveness, he'd replied, his eyes cold. I'm delivering consequences. Now, as her wedding day unfolded, Melissa played her part. She smiled for photos, thanked guests, and pretended everything was normal. But her stomach twisted with anxiety. Across the resort, her brother Timothy was greeting guests with charm he'd inherited from their mother. At 24, Tim had always been the rebellious one, clashing with their father's strict expectations. When Diane had approached him with the truth about Vincent, Tim had eagerly joined their conspiracy. What none of them realized was that Vincent had installed monitoring software on all their devices months ago. He had recordings of every conversation, every plan, every betrayal, and he'd been quietly moving pieces on the board ever since. As Melissa's maid of honor helped adjust her veil, her phone buzzed with a text from her father. Whatever happens today, remember you chose truth over comfort. I'm proud of you. She took a deep breath and prepared to walk down the aisle, knowing that the wedding ceremony was merely the opening act of a much darker performance. Chapter 3, The First Move. The wedding ceremony concluded without incident. Vincent watched with calculated attentiveness as his daughter and new son-in-law, Bradley Foster, a decent young man thankfully uninvolved in the conspiracy, exchanged vows under a flower-laden arbor facing the desert mountains. In the front row, Diane dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, the perfect picture of a mother's joy. Next to her sat her sister Pamela Johnston and Pamela's husband George, both unwitting pawns in the game being played. Larry Donovan stood among the groomsmen, having wormed his way into the wedding party as a family friend. His wife Patricia sat in the audience, oblivious to her husband's betrayal. Vincent noted each player's position with the cool assessment of a chess master. The ceremony was merely positioning pieces on the board. The reception would begin the real game. As the wedding party moved to the grand ballroom for the reception, Vincent circulated among guests, playing the role of the proud, generous father. He shook hands, accepted congratulations, and maintained the facade of normality while monitoring the subtle signals from his security team stationed throughout the venue. Roland Mercer, Vincent's most trusted associate and the only person besides Melissa who knew the full extent of his plan, approached with a glass of bourbon. Everything's in place, Roland murmured. Our friends from Chicago have arrived. Vincent nodded imperceptibly. And our Boston connection? In position, waiting for your signal. Good. Vincent took a sip of his drink. Make sure the technical team is ready. When this starts, timing will be everything. As the reception progressed, Vincent delivered his father of the bride's speech with practiced emotion, toasting the newlyweds and drawing appreciative laughter from the guests. No one would have suspected the calculated rage behind his cordial exterior. The father-daughter dance came next. As Vincent and Melissa moved across the floor to The Way You Look Tonight, she leaned close to his ear. I'm sorry for what happens next, Dad, she whispered, following their scripted exchange. Vincent squeezed her hand reassuringly. Just remember what I told you. Stay by Bradley, no matter what. As the dance concluded, Vincent noticed Diane making her way to the band's microphone. Her face wore the expression he knew well, false concern masking malicious intent. Larry Donovan had positioned himself near the main exit, while Timothy stood by the audiovisual controls, finger hovering over a laptop key. The trap was about to be sprung, but not the one they had planned. Vincent pressed the small remote in his pocket twice. Throughout the ballroom, the resort's security staff, all replaced by Vincent's own people, moved to their positions. The electronic locks on the doors engaged with an almost imperceptible click. Diane tapped the microphone, calling for attention. "Before we continue the celebration," she announced, her voice dripping with rehearsed emotion, "there's something everyone should know about my husband." Vincent looked around the room at the faces of his so-called friends and family, many of whom had been told in advance what was coming. They watched with barely disguised anticipation, eager for the spectacle of his downfall. He allowed himself a cold smile as the ballroom's lights suddenly dimmed, and the large projection screens meant for wedding photos flickered to life, cutting off Diane's speech. Vincent stepped forward. "I believe you were about to tell everyone a story, darling," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent room. "But I'm afraid I'll be the one giving tonight's presentation." The screens displayed a single image, Diane and Larry in an intimate embrace, dated just 3 days earlier. "You see," Vincent continued calmly, "I've been waiting for this moment for quite some time." Chapter 4. The Trap Reversed. Stunned silence gripped the ballroom. Diane stood frozen at the microphone, her planned speech forgotten as her own betrayal was projected on screens for all 200 wedding guests to see. "Vincent, I can explain," she began, but Vincent raised his hand, silencing her with a gesture. "For those of you who came tonight expecting a different show," Vincent addressed the crowd, his voice dangerously calm, "I apologize for the change in programming. My wife and her lover had planned quite the spectacle. A public revelation about my past, accusations of criminality, and a dramatic exit leaving me humiliated and ruined." He moved to the center of the dance floor, commanding the space like a prosecutor before a jury. "Instead, you're going to witness something else entirely, the truth." With another press of his remote, the screens changed to display text messages between Diane and Larry, dating back years, detailing not just their affair, but their conspiracy. "We need to access his offshore accounts before making any move. Tim says he can get into his father's computer if we create a distraction. The wedding will be perfect. Everyone important will be there to witness his fall." Gasps rippled through the audience. Patricia Donovan, Larry's wife, stood abruptly, her face contorted with shock and betrayal. "That's enough," Larry called out, moving toward Vincent. "You're embarrassing yourself, Vince." Vincent smiled coldly. "I'm just getting started, Larry. Or should I call you Lawrence Preston, formerly of the SEC, disbarred for taking bribes? Yes, I know who you really are." Larry stopped mid-stride, color draining from his face. "Security," Vincent called, and 2 men in suits immediately flanked Larry. "Please escort Mr. Donovan to the conference room. We have some guests there who are very interested in discussing his past financial activities." As Larry was led away, Vincent turned his attention back to Diane, who had collapsed into a chair, her perfectly made-up face now streaked with tears. "As for my loving wife," Vincent continued, "she was particularly concerned about my hidden past, about the secrets I've kept." He looked directly at Diane. "You wanted everyone to know who I really am? Let's make sure they get the full picture." The screens changed again, showing photos of Vincent meeting with men in expensive suits. "These aren't crime bosses," Vincent explained to the stunned audience. "They're federal agents. For the past 15 years, I've been a confidential informant and consultant for an organized crime task force, helping dismantle the very organization I once worked for." This revelation sent another wave of murmurs through the crowd. Vincent had never been just a businessman. He had been playing a much more dangerous game, one that put him at constant risk. The offshore accounts my wife was so eager to expose, managed by the federal government as part of my protection agreement. The mysterious meetings? Debriefings with my handlers. Vincent walked slowly toward Diane, who shrank back in her seat. "You wanted to destroy me using half-truths and manipulated evidence," he said quietly, though the microphones carried his voice throughout the room. "You involved our children. You betrayed not just our marriage, but our family." Timothy Harlow stood paralyzed by the AV controls, the laptop still open to the presentation he'd been prepared to launch. Vincent's fabricated criminal records and evidence of money laundering that Diane had planned to expose. "Tim," Vincent called to his son without looking away from Diane, "I suggest you close that laptop unless you want everyone to see the contents of your private communications with Carlyle Holdings." Tim slammed the laptop shut, his face ashen. "For those who came here as innocent guests," Vincent addressed the room again, I apologize for involving you in this family drama. The exits are now unlocked, and you're free to leave. The Fosters have prepared a lovely after-party at the Sunset Terrace for those who wish to continue celebrating Melissa and Bradley's union. As stunned guests began to file out, Vincent nodded to Roland Mercer, who approached Diane. Mrs. Harlow, there are some legal representatives who would like to speak with you regarding certain financial transactions made from joint accounts without proper authorization. Diane looked up at Vincent, fear replacing her earlier confidence. What have you done? Nothing compared to what you planned to do to me, Vincent replied softly. This is just the beginning. As Roland escorted Diane away, Melissa approached her father, her wedding dress a stark contrast to the dark drama unfolding. Was this always your plan? She asked quietly. Vincent placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Plan B, actually. I had hoped it wouldn't come to this. His eyes softened slightly. Go join Bradley. This day should still be about your future, not the end of mine and your mother's. As Melissa reluctantly left with her bewildered groom, Vincent surveyed the now empty ballroom, the scattered champagne glasses and half-eaten cake a testament to the celebration turned nightmare. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Calabrese sends his regards. Debt paid in full. After 30 years, the call had finally come, and Vincent had answered it by eliminating Larry Donovan, who apparently had been more than just his wife's lover. He had been working for Vincent's old enemies, using Diane to get close enough to destroy him. Vincent deleted the message and walked toward the conference room where Larry was being held. The night was far from over. Chapter 5. The Depths of Betrayal. The conference room of the Grand Sonoran Resort had been transformed into an impromptu interrogation chamber. Larry Donovan sat at the long mahogany table, tie loosened, sweat beading on his forehead despite the room's cool temperature. Across from him sat two stone-faced men in dark suits whom Vincent had introduced simply as associates from Chicago. Vincent entered the room and dismissed the security guards with a nod. He took a seat directly opposite Larry, placing a thick file folder on the table between them. How long have you been working for the Rossi family, Larry? Vincent asked without preamble. Larry's attempt at confusion was unconvincing. I don't know what you're talking about. Vincent opened the folder and slid across a photograph showing Larry meeting with Anthony Rossi, the son of Salvatore Calabrese's longtime rival. The Rossis have been trying to find me for decades, Vincent continued conversationally. After I helped the feds dismantle the Calabrese operations, they assumed I had either betrayed them to their rivals or taken something that belonged to them. Neither was true, but the Rossis aren't known for their careful fact-checking. He slid another document across the table, a complete background check on Lawrence Preston, revealing connections to organized crime that dated back to his days at the Securities and Exchange Commission. It must have seemed like winning the lottery when you discovered who I really was, Vincent mused. Did you seduce my wife first, then discover my identity? Or did you target her specifically because you knew? Larry's facade finally cracked. It doesn't matter now, does it? You've won this round, Vinny. This isn't a game with rounds, Larry. This is the end of the match. Vincent leaned forward. I want to know everyone involved. Every person who knew about this, who helped you, who was waiting to benefit from my destruction. For the next hour, Larry confessed everything under the watchful eyes of the Chicago men, federal agents posing as mobsters, another layer of Vincent's elaborate counter-strategy. He revealed how he'd been approached by the Rossi family 5 years earlier after a gambling debt spiraled out of control. They'd offered to clear his debts in exchange for information about one of his clients, Vincent Harlow, whom they suspected might be Vinnie Harkins. Larry had seduced Diane, finding her receptive due to her resentment over Vincent's emotional distance and strict parenting style. Together, they had planned to destroy Vincent publicly, allow the Rossis to eliminate him, and split his considerable assets. Timothy had been easily manipulated, his lifetime of competing for his father's approval, making him vulnerable to Diane's tearful stories of Vincent's true nature and supposed danger to the family. What about Melissa? Vincent asked, his voice betraying emotion for the first time. Was she always part of your plan? Larry nodded reluctantly. We needed her wedding as the stage. The Rossis wanted your humiliation to be public, spectacular. They've been waiting 30 years for revenge. Vincent stood abruptly. Wait here. Your federal friends have some paperwork for you to sign. He left the conference room and walked down the hallway to another suite where Diane sat alone, still in her mother-of-the-bride dress, mascara streaked down her face. 30 years, Vincent said as he entered. 30 years I gave you. I built a life for us, provided everything you could want, protected you from a past you knew nothing about. Diane looked up, her earlier shock now hardened into defiance. Protected me? You lied to me from the day we met. Our entire marriage was founded on a fake identity. I changed my name, Diane, not who I was. There's a difference. You were never present, Vincent. Always working, always keeping secrets, always controlling everything and everyone around you. Vincent laughed bitterly. So you decided to destroy me? To take my children, my reputation, my life? To hand me over to people who would kill me without hesitation? For the first time, Diane looked genuinely surprised. Kill you? No one was going to kill you. This was about money, about freedom from your controlling grip on all of us. Vincent realized with cold clarity that Larry had kept Diane in the dark about the Rossies' true intentions. She had been a pawn in a larger game, just as she had tried to make pawns of their children. Let me make something perfectly clear, Vincent said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. By this time tomorrow, you will have nothing. No access to accounts, properties, or assets. The prenuptial agreement you signed has a morality clause that my lawyers will ensure is enforced to the letter. He placed a document on the table between them. This is a divorce agreement. Sign it now, and I'll provide you with enough to start over somewhere far from here. Refuse, and I'll ensure that every friend, family member, and acquaintance knows exactly what you tried to do. Diane stared at the paper, then back at her husband of nearly 3 decades. You've been planning this for months, haven't you? Just waiting for us to make our move so you could spring your trap. 6 months, to be precise. Since the day I received these. Vincent placed the original surveillance photos of Diane and Larry on the table. Diane picked them up with trembling hands. Who sent these to you? Someone who owed me a favor from long ago. Someone who was keeping an eye on the Rossies and noticed them taking a sudden interest in Phoenix. Vincent shrugged. Loyalty works both ways, Diane. Something you never understood. As Diane reluctantly signed the divorce papers, Vincent felt no satisfaction, only a hollow confirmation of what he had suspected for months. The life he had built was built on sand, and the tide had finally come in. Chapter 6. The Point of No Return. The desert sunrise painted the sky in hues of orange and pink as Vincent sat alone on the balcony of his hotel suite, nursing a glass of scotch he had barely touched. The night had been long, filled with legal documents, recorded confessions, and arrangements that would permanently alter the course of multiple lives. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Roland Mercer entered, looking exhausted but satisfied. It's done, Roland said, taking a seat across from Vincent. Larry Donovan is in federal custody, trading everything he knows about the Rossi operations for protection. The agents were particularly interested in the offshore accounts he set up. Vincent nodded. And Diane. On her way to the airport with her sister Pamela. The divorce papers have been filed with our attorneys. She's agreed to the terms, generous by legal standards, but a fraction of what she hoped to take. Timothy. Roland's expression darkened. He refused to meet with you. Said he has nothing to say. He's cleared out his apartment and told friends he's heading for the East Coast. Vincent absorbed this with no visible reaction, though the finality of his son's rejection cut deeper than he would admit. And the wedding couple? Melissa and Bradley left for their honeymoon as scheduled. She left you this. Roland handed Vincent an envelope. Inside was a simple note. I understand why you did what you did. I'm not sure I can forgive how you did it. I need time. Don't contact me until I reach out first. Love, Melissa. Vincent returned the note to its envelope, his face impassive. Make sure their financial gifts remain untouched. Their trust funds, too. Whatever they think of me, they shouldn't suffer financially. Roland studied his old friend. Was it worth it, Vince? You've lost your family. I lost them the moment they decided to betray me. Vincent finally took a sip of his scotch. What I did was ensure they didn't destroy me in the process. The truth was more complex than Vincent would admit aloud. He had known, on some level, that his counter-strategy would likely end any chance of reconciliation. But faced with complete destruction, personal, financial, and possibly physical, he had chosen survival over family ties. It was the same calculation he had made decades ago when leaving Boston. What will you do now? Roland asked. Vincent looked out at the desert landscape, so different from the South Boston streets where he had grown up. Start over. Again. For 30 years, Vincent had lived as a man divided, business owner and family man on the surface, informant and protector underneath. He had compartmentalized his life so effectively that neither side truly knew the other. Perhaps that division had been the root of his family's alienation, the seed from which betrayal had grown. Now, with his wife's betrayal exposed, his son's rejection complete, and his daughter's trust damaged, those compartments had finally collapsed. Vincent Harlow and Vinnie Harkins were merging back into a single man. Harder, colder, but paradoxically more authentic than he had been in decades. His phone rang, a block number. Few people had this private line. Harlow, he answered. It's done, came the gruff voice of Salvatore Calabrese, now elderly but still commanding. The Rossis have been informed that you remain under my protection. Your debt is paid in full, twice over. Thank you, Sal. Don't thank me, Vinny. You've given the feds more of my competitors than I could have eliminated in a lifetime. We're square. A pause. What will you do now? Vincent considered the question for the second time in minutes. I'm not sure yet, but I won't be looking over my shoulder anymore. That's worth something. Calabrese acknowledged before hanging up. As Vincent put down the phone, Roland raised an eyebrow in question. The last loose end, Vincent explained. The Rossis won't be coming after me again. Roland nodded. So you're free. Free, Vincent repeated, testing the word. It felt foreign on his tongue after decades of vigilance. I suppose I am. As the morning light strengthened, Vincent made a decision. He would sell his business, liquidate his Arizona assets, and disappear once more. Not out of fear this time, but out of a desire for reinvention. At 52, he had time for one more transformation. He picked up his phone and dialed a rarely used number. Agent Kessler, he said when the call connected. Vincent Harlow, I think it's time we discussed terminating our arrangement. I've fulfilled my end of our bargain. As he outlined his terms for ending his role as informant, Vincent felt the weight of decades beginning to lift. The price had been steep, his family, his identity, his carefully constructed life. But as the sun rose fully over the desert, he allowed himself to contemplate something he hadn't considered in 30 years, a future unburdened by secrets. Chapter 7. The Aftermath. 3 months had passed since Melissa's wedding day. The tabloids had finally tired of the scandal, moving on to fresher controversies after weeks of sensationalized headlines about the wedding day revenge and security tycoon's double life. Vincent had weathered the media storm with characteristic stoicism, his public statement brief and unapologetic. Family matters should remain private. I asked for respect during this difficult time. Vincent sat in the empty living room of what had once been his family home, surrounded by packing boxes. The sprawling Paradise Valley mansion would be on the market by the end of the week, the last of his Arizona ties to be severed. His security consulting firm had been sold to a national corporation for a sum that ensured Vincent would never need to work again. Most of his wealth had been converted to assets that couldn't be traced or seized, a habit from his former life that had proven difficult to break. The doorbell rang, echoing through the half-empty house. Vincent checked the security camera on his phone before walking to the door. Timothy stood on the doorstep, thinner than Vincent remembered, his expression a mixture of defiance and uncertainty. I wasn't sure you'd still be here, Tim said as Vincent opened the door. Moving out on Friday, Vincent replied, stepping aside to let his son enter. Why are you here, Tim? Timothy walked into the foyer, hands shoved in his pockets. I needed to understand. Understand what? Why you did it the way you did it. Why you couldn't just confront Mom, divorce her like a normal person. Why you had to destroy everyone so completely. Vincent led Tim to the kitchen, the only room still fully functional, and poured 2 cups of coffee. Would you have believed me if I'd told you what your mother and Larry were planning? Vincent asked. Or would you have dismissed it as paranoia, manipulation? Timothy stared into his coffee. I don't know. That's why. Vincent took a sip from his cup. You were too far gone, Tim. They had poisoned you against me for years. Evidence was the only language you would understand. You humiliated Mom in front of everyone we know. She planned worse for me. You ruined Larry's life. He was working for people who wanted me dead. Timothy slammed his cup down, coffee sloshing over the rim. That's the problem, Dad. Every justification, every explanation, it's all about you. Your reputation, your security, your revenge. Did you ever stop to think about what your grand scheme would do to Melissa? To me, Vincent's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. I gave you both a choice. Melissa came to me. You didn't. Because I was scared of you. Timothy's voice cracked with emotion. I've always been scared of you, Dad. Your expectations, your judgment, your cold calculation. Mom might have manipulated me, but she wasn't wrong about everything. You've always been two different people, the father you pretended to be and whoever you really are. For several moments, the only sound was the ticking of the kitchen clock. Vincent studied his son's face, seeing traces of himself in the stubborn set of Tim's jaw. You're right, Vincent finally admitted, surprising both of them. I lived a compartmentalized life. I kept secrets I shouldn't have kept, not just about my past, but about who I really am. That distance created opportunities for others to turn you against me. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the desert landscape. But understand something, Tim, everything I've done, from leaving Boston to building this life, was to protect this family. When that family turned on me, I protected myself. That's who I am, at my core. I survive. At any cost. Yes, Vincent said simply. At any cost. Timothy absorbed this, his anger giving way to a complicated grief. The father he had both feared and craved approval from was acknowledging the truth. His love had always been conditional, his protection extending only as far as loyalty did. I can't forgive you, Timothy said finally. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Vincent turned back to face his son. But I am offering you a choice. There's a trust fund in your name. It's substantial, enough to start whatever life you want, wherever you want. You can access it on one condition. What condition? That you never contact your mother or Larry Donovan again. Their chapter in our lives is over. Permanently. Timothy stared at his father in disbelief. You're still doing it. Still controlling, still manipulating, still punishing. I'm offering you freedom, Tim. Financial freedom, freedom from the past. Take it or leave it, but don't mistake it for control. It's the last offer I'll ever make you. For a moment, Timothy looked like he might lash out physically. Instead, he laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You know what the worst part is? A part of me still wants your approval, even now. That's how effective you were at making yourself the center of our universe. He stood and moved toward the door. Keep your money, Dad. I'll make my own way. As Timothy reached the doorway, Vincent called after him. She was using you, Tim. From the beginning. The evidence is all there if you ever want to see it. Timothy paused, but didn't turn around. Maybe she was. But at least she made me feel loved while doing it. After his son left, Vincent returned to his packing, methodically wrapping crystal glasses in newspaper and placing them in boxes. His phone rang, a number he recognized. Yes, he answered. Mr. Harlow, it's Agent Kessler. We've finished processing your exit from the program. Your new documentation will be delivered tomorrow, as requested. Thank you, Agent Kessler. There's one more thing. We've received intelligence that Timothy Harlow met with Patricia Donovan yesterday. Vincent's hand stilled on the glass he was wrapping. Larry's wife? What? We're not sure. The meeting lasted approximately 1 hour. We thought you should know, given the circumstances. After ending the call, Vincent set down the glass and pulled out his laptop. Within minutes, he had accessed Timothy's recent communications, a violation of privacy that would have once bothered him but now seemed necessary. What he found confirmed his suspicions. Timothy and Patricia Donovan had indeed met, not as conspirators, but as victims seeking understanding. Patricia, devastated by her husband's betrayal, had reached out to others hurt by the scandal. Their meeting had been about healing, not revenge. For the first time since the wedding day, Vincent felt something akin to regret, not for exposing the betrayal, but for the collateral damage his method had caused to innocent parties like Patricia. He closed the laptop and resumed his packing. Regret was a luxury he couldn't afford, not when there was still one more loose end to tie up. Chapter 8. The Final Confrontation. The private room at Chandler's Steakhouse was dimly lit, offering the privacy Vincent required for what would likely be his last meeting in Phoenix. He arrived early, selecting a seat that gave him a clear view of both the door and the emergency exit, old habits that had kept him alive for decades. Diane arrived precisely on time, her appearance markedly different from the polished socialite she had been 3 months ago. Her designer clothes had been replaced with simple, understated attire, her jewelry minimal, her once perfect hair showing strands of gray she had previously colored religiously. "Vincent," she acknowledged stiffly as she took a seat across from him. "Diane, thank you for coming." He gestured to the waiter, who brought the wine he had pre-ordered, a Cabernet they had once shared on anniversaries. "I don't want your wine," Diane said coldly. "Let's get to the point. Your lawyer said you needed to discuss one final matter before the divorce is finalized." Vincent dismissed the waiter with a nod. "How are you settling in Santa Fe?" Diane's surprise was evident. "You've been monitoring me. Just ensuring the terms of our agreement are being honored. You've stayed away from Larry, from Timothy, from the press. I appreciate that." "I didn't do it for you," Diane snapped. "I did it because I want this nightmare over with. I want to move on with whatever life I can salvage from the wreckage you created." Vincent allowed her the delusion that he alone was responsible for their current situation. "I asked you here because I received information that concerns you. Information I thought you should have before I leave Arizona permanently." He slid a folder across the table. Diane hesitated before opening it, as if expecting another bombshell that would further devastate her world. Inside were medical records belonging to Larry Donovan. "What is this?" she asked, confusion replacing hostility. "Larry was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's 18 months ago," Vincent explained. "He hid it from everyone, including you. The cognitive decline would have become noticeable within another year or two." Diane scanned the documents, her hand trembling slightly. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you should know that his betrayal wasn't just about money or revenge. He was desperate, Diane, facing a future of mental deterioration with no financial safety net." Vincent's voice remained neutral, clinical. "The Rossis offered him a way out: eliminate me, share my assets, secure his future care. And me? Was I just convenient? At first, probably. But the recordings suggest he did develop genuine feelings for you." Vincent paused. As genuine as someone like Larry was capable of, anyway. Diane closed the folder, her composure cracking. "Why tell me this now? To twist the knife? To make sure I know how completely I was fooled?" "No," Vincent said, surprising himself with the truth of his answer. "To give you context. To help you make sense of what happened. We were together for almost 30 years, Diane. You deserve that much, at least." Tears welled in Diane's eyes. 30 years. Did any of it mean anything to you, Vincent? Was any of it real? Vincent considered the question carefully. "Yes," he said finally. "It was real. Compartmentalized, incomplete, but real. I did love you, Diane. I built a life with you. I just never trusted you with all of me. And I never knew you at all," Diane whispered. "Not really. No one did. That was the point." They sat in silence, two people who had shared a bed, raised children, and built a life together, now strangers connected only by legal documents and painful memories. "I'm leaving the country next week," Vincent said eventually. "The divorce will be finalized before then. This is goodbye, Diane." Diane studied his face, searching for something, regret, perhaps, or a hint of the man she had married. "You won't forgive me, will you?" "Not ever." "No," Vincent confirmed. "I won't. Even knowing about Larry's condition? Even understanding why it happened? Understanding why a betrayal happened doesn't negate the betrayal itself." Vincent's eyes hardened. "You made your choice, Diane. You chose Larry. You chose to destroy me rather than leave me honestly. You involved our children in your scheme. Some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed." Diane nodded slowly, accepting the finality of his judgment. "Where will you go? Better that you don't know." She gathered her purse and stood. "I hope you find peace, Vincent. But I doubt you will. Not with walls that high around your heart." As she moved to leave, Vincent called after her softly. "Diane." She paused. "The recordings exonerate you from any knowledge of the Rossis' involvement. The federal agents know you weren't part of that aspect of the conspiracy." Surprise flickered across her face. "You didn't have to do that." "No," Vincent acknowledged. "I didn't. It was a small mercy, perhaps his last act as the man who had been Vincent Harlow, family man." After she left, he paid the bill and walked out into the Arizona evening, feeling the weight of finality in every step. His phone vibrated with a text message. "Melissa, I'm ready to talk. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the Botanical Garden." Vincent typed a simple response. "I'll be there." One last conversation before his departure. One last chance to explain himself to the only family member who had given him the benefit of doubt. Whether it would be enough to salvage any relationship remained to be seen. As he drove back to his nearly empty house, Vincent allowed himself to contemplate the cost of his revenge. He had protected himself, yes, ensured his survival, maintained his freedom, secured his financial future. But he had lost the family he had spent decades building, revealed truths that could never be unlearned, and burned bridges that could never be rebuilt. For a man who had spent his life calculating risks and returns, the equation seemed suddenly, troublingly unbalanced. Chapter 9. The New Beginning. The desert botanical garden was alive with early morning visitors, tourists and locals alike wandering among the carefully curated collections of cacti and desert flora. Vincent arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a bench with a clear view of the entrance, his final meeting on American soil fraught with more anxiety than he would admit. Melissa appeared precisely at 10, wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy day, her pace measured as she approached. She sat beside him, maintaining a careful distance. "Thank you for coming," Vincent said. "I almost didn't," Melissa admitted, removing her sunglasses. Her eyes, so like his own, were tired but resolute. "But I had questions that need answers." "Ask them." She turned to face him directly. "Did you know what would happen? Did you know exactly how it would all play out?" Vincent considered lying, offering a comforting half-truth, but something in his daughter's expression stopped him. She deserved honesty, complete honesty, even if it was uncomfortable. "I knew the broad strokes," he acknowledged. "I knew your mother and Larry would try to expose me at the wedding. I knew they had involved Tim. I suspected they had tried to involve you as well. The rest." He shrugged. "I created contingencies for multiple scenarios. The exact sequence unfolded based on their actions, not just my plans." Melissa nodded, absorbing this. "And now? Mom's life is destroyed. Tim won't speak to anyone. Larry's facing prison. Was it worth it? They conspired to destroy me, Melissa. To take everything I've spent 30 years building. To expose me to people who wanted me dead." Vincent's voice remained calm, but his eyes flashed with the cold intensity she had glimpsed on the wedding day. "What would you have had me do? Turn the other cheek? Let them win? You could have handled it privately. Legal channels, quiet divorce, private confrontations. That wasn't an option. Not with what they were planning." They fell silent, watching a hummingbird flit between desert blooms. "I've spent 3 months trying to understand you, Dad," Melissa finally said. "Trying to reconcile the father who taught me to ride a bike with the man who orchestrated such a cold, calculated revenge. And I realized something. They're the same person. You've always been methodical, always 10 steps ahead, always in control." She turned to him. "The difference is that for the first time, I saw what happens when someone threatens what you value." Vincent felt an unexpected surge of pride at his daughter's insight. Most people go their whole lives without seeing the darker capabilities of those closest to them. "I'm sorry you had to see mine." "Are you?" "Sorry, I mean." Vincent considered the question carefully. "I'm sorry for the pain it caused you. I'm sorry your wedding day became a battleground. I'm sorry you lost the illusion of a functional family." He paused. "But am I sorry for what I did to those who betrayed me?" "No, I'm not." Melissa nodded as if she had expected this answer. "I received your letter. About the trust fund, the house in Colorado, the arrangement with your lawyers. It's all yours, no strings attached, unlike what I offered Tim." Vincent's expression softened slightly. "You came to me first, Melissa. You gave me the chance to explain. That means everything to me. I didn't do it for a reward." "I know. That's why you deserve one." Melissa studied her father's face. "Where will you go now? Better that you don't know the specifics. But I'll be comfortable, and I'll be safe." He hesitated before adding, "There will be a way to contact me, through my lawyers, if you ever need to. For emergencies only. You're really disappearing again. Becoming someone new. It's what I'm good at." Vincent allowed himself a small smile. "Think of it as retirement. A permanent vacation somewhere warm, with no looking over my shoulder, no compartmentalized life." Melissa reached out impulsively and took his hand, the first physical contact between them since the wedding day. "Will you be happy, Dad?" The question caught him off guard. Happiness had never been his primary concern. Security, control, and respect had always taken precedence. "I'll be content," he said finally. "That's enough." They sat together as the morning warmed around them, father and daughter connected by shared blood and shared secrets, separated by moral calculations neither could fully bridge. I have something for you, Vincent said eventually, reaching into his jacket. He withdrew a small, ornate key. This opens a safe deposit box at First National. Inside is a letter explaining everything. My full past, the complete truth about what happened with your mother and Larry, all of it. Read it or don't, that's your choice. Melissa took the key, turning it over in her fingers. Why not just tell me now? Because some truths need time and distance to be properly understood. And because... He hesitated. Because I want you to have the choice of knowing or not knowing. It's a choice I never gave your mother. It was as close to an admission of regret as Vincent would allow himself. As they prepared to part, Melissa asked one final question. Do you think people can change, Dad? Really change? Vincent thought about the man he had been as Vinnie Harkins, the man he had become as Vincent Harlow, and the man he would become next, each version carrying the essential core of who he was while adapting to new circumstances. People don't change their nature, he said carefully, but they can change how they channel it, how they direct it. He met his daughter's gaze. I'll always be someone who protects what's mine, who punishes betrayal, who plans 10 steps ahead. But perhaps I can learn to build fewer walls, to trust a little more selectively rather than not at all. It wasn't a promise of transformation, but it was an acknowledgement of possibility. For Vincent Harlow, a man who had spent decades dealing in certainties and absolutes, it represented a significant concession. Melissa seemed to understand. She leaned forward and kissed his cheek. Goodbye, Dad. Be well, whoever you become next. Vincent watched her walk away, carrying the key to secrets he had guarded for a lifetime. The choice to access those secrets would be hers alone, the first step in breaking the cycle of control and concealment that had defined their family. 3 days later, Vincent Harlow officially ceased to exist. The man who boarded a private plane bound for a non-extradition country carried impeccable documentation identifying him as Michael Sullivan, retired investment consultant and widower. His considerable wealth had been distributed among untraceable accounts, offshore holdings, and physical assets secured in multiple locations. As the plane lifted off from American soil, he gazed down at the Phoenix landscape receding below him. The city where he had built a life, raised a family, and ultimately orchestrated their destruction was becoming a speck in the distance, just as Boston had 30 years earlier. He felt no regret, no second thoughts. Those who had plotted against him had received exactly what they deserved. His daughter had been given the tools to understand him, should she choose to use them. His son had made his choice, just as Vincent had made his. The cabin attendant approached with a glass of champagne. To new beginnings, Mr. Sullivan? He accepted the glass with a small smile. To new beginnings. As the plane banked east toward his future, Vincent, now Michael, allowed himself to contemplate the possibility that Melissa had raised, not of fundamental change, but of evolution, of directing his calculating mind and unforgiving nature toward different ends, of building a life based not on compartmentalization and secrets, but on a carefully curated authenticity. It was, he decided, a hypothesis worth testing in whatever time he had left. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.